Hello Internet, I'm Jackie Fox and this is the final episode in my series on personal fitness. Now I've gone through a lot of thoughts on alienation and on this idea that I call body consciousness, where you were using fitness, especially stretching and yoga, to de-alienate yourself from your own body and using that understanding of yourself to adapt yourself better to the life that you hope to lead. And as I've said a number of times, I think the biggest gap for most people is just that of knowledge. And we also don't have the time to we also don't like to just stand around unsure of ourselves, unsure of what to do next. Even if we're completely alone, that can still feel pretty embarrassing. We're also kind of afraid of wasting time because having to work more and more hours to survive has made our time more precious to us. Now, I've explained in my previous video why exercise equipment, as it has become this diverse, commoditized, specialized thing, actually helps to alienate us from body consciousness. But it does also make the experience a lot more beginner-friendly or low-knowledge friendly. And it doesn't have to alienate yourself from body consciousness. You can still practice bodily awareness while using a machine. In fact, it'll help you use it better. But you have to remember to remain aware of what you are feeling as you perform this exercise. Perhaps even more than thinking about doing a certain number of reps and sets. It's more about experimenting with your body to learn its own weaknesses. And one mistake that I often see beginners making is trying to rush through their reps so that they can get up to a number that they feel is impressive, which is kind of gamifying this whole thing to where you're trying to get a high score. But really, if you were doing slow reps and kind of focusing and maybe even slowing down further as you begin to activate the muscles that you really want to work on, this targeted and focused approach will actually lend to much better results, because instead of a kind of a quantitative approach of trying to bust out a bunch of reps, you're actually you're improving the quality of each repetition and also targeting the progress to exactly the part of your body that you want to work on. Now, there's absolutely nothing stopping you from doing that, even with these commodified machines. Plus, gyms are the kind of place, especially in the free weight section, where if you want to graduate from these machines and learn a more body-conscious and holistic way of exercising through free weights, there's a lot of people who can help you do that and help you learn with a bit of guidance and hopefully in a safer way. Hopefully. So the two things that a gym really has going for them is that a gym membership, especially at a discount gym, as I guess I'm going to call them in this video, is a good way to have access to everything that you could possibly need to get fit, even though in actuality, if you had more fitness knowledge and body consciousness, you wouldn't need 99% of it. But it does help solve that barrier to entry that comes with knowledge. And even in this video, I would say that if you feel like you're just so ignorant of your body, that this would be a good place to start. And I wouldn't begrudge you for it. But I do want to make you a bit more aware of what the industry is like for the people who work in it. So I've worked in discount gyms, both Planet Fitness and Gold's gyms, which are global chains, which I think have, at least if you combine the two, they have more locations than any other gym in the world. That I can say for certain. They're both pretty big and on top of global domination in this industry. And not only are they the biggest players in the industry, but they're also typically some of the cheapest, and each of them has its own quirks. The first one that I worked for was Planet Fitness, and this is generally a bit cheaper than Gold's Gym, and in a series of gyms that are meant to lower the financial bar of entry as low as it can really go while keeping the gym still full and large and able to accommodate enough people, which really becomes important when you try to become the gym of the people. Even working on high volumes of customers, these gyms typically don't make a tremendous amount of money, and a lot of franchise owners tend to own several of them in order to make a good amount off of them collectively. One of the things that they're banking on, by the way, especially at the discount gyms, is that you, typical consumer, usually aren't going to show up. There simply isn't enough space in the gyms for everyone who has a gym membership to show up on every day. That's simply how this business model runs. If everyone who got a gym membership at Planet Fitness showed up daily to do exercise, it would create a sort of carrying capacity problem where people would begin to drop out naturally because they're sick of showing up and never having any open equipment to work out on. So in a way, the person who signs up for a gym membership and never shows up for it is kind of subsidizing the low-cost gym memberships for everyone else. And look, this is how most of this industry works. I'm just saying that discount gyms are a hell of a lot more dependent on this than others. Personally, I actually felt quite a bit of fulfillment from working at this gym, and that was because I took it upon myself to try to form personal connections with a lot of the regular customers. This was, of course, encouraged from a customer service standpoint, but not a lot of people actually did it, and the main reason for that was we were paid like shit. Why would you go so far above and beyond in customer service and try to get to know these people for minimum wage? I would say that it is still worth it because of the job satisfaction from building these relationships and the fulfillment and the lack of alienation that I felt on the job. And working in the gym industry is probably among a certain unique set of circumstances within capitalist labor where you really are giving a person a product at a discount that if they use it, it's going to be very beneficial for them in their lives, and you will be able to witness over time, in which is a kind of beautiful way to get a sort of emotional dividend on convincing someone to sign up for a gym membership in terms of your own personal satisfaction, and also being able to see their personal satisfaction. But it's not just what they do to the lowest of the workers. They actually also exploit the shit out of anyone dumb enough to become management in one of these places. Because, look, the management position sounds good. You make a lot of money for a salary position. But at the same time, they're going to hoist all of that club's problems on your shoulders. And you will be expected to solve them. Which often led my first manager to working over 100-hour weeks, in which he began to realize that not only was he alienated at work, but he couldn't even really do stuff like enjoy the things that he bought, like this big fancy truck or all sorts of swanky tech in his apartment, because he didn't actually end up having any time to find any amount of fulfillment in those consumer goods, because while he had plenty of money, he just had no time to enjoy any of it. And when you factor in his wages by the amount of hours that he worked, and you factor in the idea of giving him overtime, he was actually probably making less money per hour some weeks than any of the rest of us. This leads to a state where you have a manager who's about to break emotionally or physically at any given point. And this is a problem that exists in a lot of these type of discount places. I'm not just saying this about Planet Fitness. I've heard exactly the same kind of thing coming from interviews of managers at places like Dollar General or these dollar stores. This is a very common tactic, especially in this sort of franchise ownership strategy. You take someone who's never had a lot of money, you offer them a bigger number than they could imagine earning otherwise, and you basically own them at that point, fully and completely outside of the constraints of hourly labor. This also tends to make even good people into neurotic assholes. And I've got to say that, like, in the months before he quit and leading up to it, a lot of us really felt sorry for him because he really just looked like he was on the edge. He looked like he was breaking, but he was strong, and he stuck with the company for several years in that situation, and he really only gave us any inkling of how bad this was towards the end, like right before he left, and pretty much he only told the supervisors. And as far as I've heard from a lot of the locations that I've been to since the pandemic, they haven't been able to keep a manager for very long, even though they tend to offer them quite a lot of money even now for the position, and the pandemic absolutely exacerbated all of these problems in gym chains. And it seems like now a lot of them are trying to, they're like operating in recovery mode, where they're trying to cut as many of their costs as possible, like short staff, making locations even more unable to help than they were before, but also trying to find ways to raise their prices and lowering their hours and just any way that they can try to make up for the huge loss that the pandemic represented for the gym industry. And after interviewing a few current employees, their wages seem to be at just above $8 an hour now in the locations that I surveyed. That doesn't represent a big improvement, and given how much wages in the service industry have increased in general for a lot of workers, it really doesn't seem like this company is even trying to keep up. And what this means is that if I thought that the employees were previously undermotivated by their pay, well, they have only become more so undermotivated now. And since they are also now increasingly short-staffed, this leads them to take even less interest in the customer relationship, which further alienates themselves from taking fulfillment in their position and having relationships with the customers, who also happen to be their local community. This also leads to absolutely terrible customer service in comparison. Unhappy workers will never be happy to help you in the same way that someone who is fulfilled and satisfied might be. There's another through line here that I want to cover that makes these type of gyms different from smaller local institutions, and that is the way that they treat their personal trainers. See, if you were thinking that this worked out for anyone, you were wrong. Planet Fitness doesn't really like to talk about this, but there actually isn't, or at least there wasn't when I worked there, any requirements for certifications for a personal trainer. In fact, they're not even allowed to call them a personal trainer for technical reasons, but also because they don't actually offer personal sessions. Instead, a person is hired on an hourly wage that's not much higher than the other employees of the company, and probably given the worst schedule of any employee other than management to teach classes. Remember when I said that when you move over to free weights, you'll tend to find people who will help you move forward? Well, remember that all of our bodies are different, and something that might not injure someone could definitely injure you, and there is certainly a benefit to having a properly trained personal trainer or someone looking out for people exercising in the gym to prevent these injuries. Especially divorced from a conception of personal fitness that involves body consciousness, it can be a lot easier to push yourself to these injuries, especially if the reason you're lifting so much weight is essentially for vanity. So I would say that having a fitness expert in a place where people were allowed to lift weights in such ways that could permanently injure them is a pretty important feature, and that having a random bunch of gym rats that may or may not be able to help your body specifically when you're doing something wrong, or even know what you should be doing, really isn't a solution either. And neither is offering classes, even ones that are included with membership. I mean, technically, this is a good idea because everyone should get a little bit of guidance in the things that they're doing before they do them in a perfect world, but again, this is no real replacement, and I also want you to remember that even a fitness trainer is not actually a personal trainer, and is also not required to have the physiological knowledge that might prevent you from injuring yourself. So even the fitness trainer may be no better than someone standing next to you in the free weight section. That's not to say that people who have credentials aren't a lot more likely to get this job, and that often credentialed individuals do end up in this position. But I think that part of the reason that their standards are so low is also to give them a reason not to pay someone who is credentialed what they're worth to do this job, because the credentials that they have aren't technically required to do the job that they're being asked to do. So how is Gold's Gym any different? Well, there's a couple of differences philosophically behind the scenes. The biggest difference to customers is that they have heavier weights. But again, having super heavy weights isn't necessary for proper physical fitness, which mostly can be done with your own body weight. But for people who are really trying to bodybuild and are really getting into the aesthetics of personal fitness, this can become more and more necessary, even though I definitely saw some people get pretty huge at Planet Fitness. Since we just discussed Planet Fitness's fitness trainer, let's discuss personal trainers that you can get at Gold's. They're all working on commission and none of them come with the membership, so you have to pay them extra in addition to what you're paying for your membership. First of all, if you ever see a Gold's trainer just standing around not working with anyone, I want you to realize they're not being paid to be there right then. I just want you to be aware of that. And what they are paid for the time that they engage with individuals that they have to find themselves through the gym's membership is not comparable to what they would be making based on their certifications outside of this type of a gym. It's slightly better than the pay at Planet Fitness in theory, but in practice, since they hire so many more personal trainers than they actually need, it actually creates a really unhealthy culture of competition among them. It also creates situations where the pay can be incredibly unstable, and I've seen any number of personal trainers actually take front desk jobs for more consistent pay. And this is a job that, to my knowledge, requires a certain level of certifications, unlike the fitness trainer at Planet Fitness, because this trainer actually does do personal training. It's only that their profit margin compared to the gym is pretty low compared to the outside world. You're probably paying as much or more for personal training at Gold's Gym than you would be at a local gym. However, Gold's is likely taking a much higher cut of this than you would be getting with this independently working guy than you might get at a local gym where they might be working independently, or which they would get the whole, or they might even be working independently, in which case they would get the whole pie. Or for a smaller gym that actually does recognize them as a crucial member of the staff in a way that these discount gyms just don't seem to. The other problem that I have with the Gold system, at least in comparison to Planet Fitness, is that they have a dedicated sales staff. They're also working primarily on commission, and at certain times of year they can actually make pretty good money because of this. But basically they have a lot of the same issues with trainers, and they have some similar issues to the trainers, but it's really made up for by the fact that they have a base pay as well, even though they're not encouraged to work over a certain amount of billable hours, usually using commission to make up for that. As a trade to that base pay, they get even less of the commission than the personal trainers do, though. And in comparison, this creates a pretty nasty environment in the sales team, which feels a bit more predatory. And honestly, this might be a bit more like the more expensive commercial gyms as opposed to discount chains like Planet Fitness, at least in terms of structure. Gold's also has, in fact, a even wider variety of fitness classes that are usually led by multiple independent contractors that are probably working for multiple institutions at once. Again, they aren't making very much money from teaching classes at Gold's, but this also results in a great diversity of teachers, which can be pretty interesting compared to Planet Fitness, who have all of their classes taught by the same person. But just like all of the other systems and changes in the ways that Gold's deals with its employees, this also creates a lot of internal competition and some pretty unhealthy vibes between some of the teachers. In addition to the fact that none of these teachers in any scenario would be able to live off of the income they make from Gold's alone, which is pretty true of basically everyone in the building who isn't getting base pay. And even the people who are getting base pay aren't doing particularly well. I actually made about as much money here as the overnight manager as I had at Planet Fitness as a shift leader, which was still an hourly position. But while it was a bit more alienating of a job to have, especially having to deal with the sales manager who was just a jackass and hated me and tried to boss me around to give me shit, and I'm like, dude, you're not even my manager. you can just back off. And eventually I had to go to HR over this guy's treatment. And again, he had no authority of he had no actual authority of me. He was just, like a good representation of that toxic sales team attitude. Anyways, once I got to the point of being an overnight manager for the front desk team, this essentially meant that I was the only person in the gym in the middle of the night with no other staff, and I never had to deal with anybody. At least anybody from management. There were occasionally customers in the middle of the night, but it was a good time to catch up on the news and Netflix. It may not have been as fulfilling as helping people with their fitness goals, but at least I didn't have to deal with anybody's bullshit. I wouldn't say that this was necessarily a satisfying job, and it still didn't pay that well, but I probably had it easier than any of the other employees there. And honestly, that alone was kind of satisfying. It wasn't until the regional manager in charge of payroll just decided to quit overnight, meaning that it took them about a whole month to get a solution for paying anyone who worked on the East Coast. So, over that month, I'm watching paychecks slowly trickle into my coworkers, and I still haven't gotten paid. And eventually, I quit, and I still haven't been able to get them to pay me. And it's like, like I said in my video about wage theft, where I'm pretty sure I also brought this up, I just, I wasn't, even as an overnight manager, I wasn't making that much money, and it really isn't enough to be able to afford to get a lawyer to try to get it back. So, while I have a lot of misgivings about the affordable gyms that you might be able to start your fitness journey in, they are the easiest place for a person who does not have a good knowledge of fitness to begin their fitness journey, and be sure to take advantage of some of that free guidance as well so you have a more effective journey. And then once you've built up an understanding of your body, cancel that membership because honestly it's all kind of toxic. That being said, I do have one last story to share in this video. I went back to the Planet Fitness location that I used to work at, and it's been several years since I worked there, and they haven't been able to keep a manager pretty much since my original manager quit, because they've all just been terrible from what the workers there understood. And most of them have been swapped out over the last year anyway, so it wasn't like any of them could really comment on the longer history of the company other than its reputation and rumors. But I'm talking to these ladies, and they're the only two people on this shift, and they're overwhelmed. And they're hiding out behind the front desk and talking to each other, dealing with customers as they come up. And I've seen this behavior before, and I saw this when I worked there, closer to a decade ago. And I'm talking to them, and I'm trying to get a sense of what it would be like to work there now. Not because I want to, but just to chart the progress of this for this video. And they say something like, hey, you see that guy over there that's just walking around? Wasn't he the one that wanted to see the gym? Oh yeah, let's just let him keep walking around. He'll figure out if he wants it or not. And to me, this was pretty upsetting because this would have been heresy when I worked there. The only reason that anyone would have been allowed to do this when I worked for the company was if they flat out refused to have someone go with them, and even then we were kind of weird about it. But in this case, due to their low pay, which is relatively even lower than it was for me and my coworkers then, and being completely understaffed with way too much to do, because, unlike what I had said about Gold's, the Planet Fitness employees other than management are very general employees. There's not a cleaning crew. There's not, a sales team. There's not a front desk staff. There's just the staff, and they have to do all of that stuff. So you might think two of them there, well, that's fine, but you gotta realize that at about any given time, to keep that gym up to standards, there has to be on average about one person dealing with stuff on the floor. Like, typically cleaning, because it is a big job to keep an entire gym clean day after day without things starting to pile up. So, there's only two of them, and honestly, they have good reasons for not wanting to send one of them out on what could be a wild goose chase. And I just want to remind you that I have empathy for the position that some of these employees are in and what they have to put up with. And I want you to as well. I want you to understand why they might do what they do. Because I think with a certain amount of slacktivism at a job that treats you the way that these do, it makes a lot of sense, honestly. You shouldn't hold it against them. They are asked to do entirely too much as it is. But part of me, the part of me that enjoyed making connections with people and using that connection to motivate them in their own fitness, that part of me really hurt to see this. And it's not that they should work harder for the money that they get, it's that they should be paid in a way that makes them feel like they might, it would be worth it for them to work harder, honestly. But I just kind of make note of what the guy looks like, and I decide, whatever, okay, I guess I'll just go work out and quit bothering these ladies, because they've clearly got stuff to do. So I go into the locker room to put my stuff away, and he's sitting there on a bench watching ESPN. So I ask him, hey, are you the guy who came in looking for a gym membership? And he says, yeah. Well, I used to work for the company a couple years ago. They're pretty busy right now up their front desk, so I can talk to you if there's anything you're interested in. I won't give you, like, the corporate approved tour or anything, but if you have any questions, I know this place like the back of my hand. And what followed was a 20-minute conversation that went places I did not expect it to. And just getting to know this man, I found out a couple of things about him that, for example, he hadn't been very fit before the pandemic happened. And he was retired and living off of a fixed income. And that gave him enough money during the pandemic to build up a garage gym. And it wouldn't... And from talking to him, I found out he didn't have a bar, he didn't have dumbbells above 40 pounds or anything like that, but he did have a pretty complete set. And certainly more things than I would say that you really need. But, you know, what people tend to think of as basic home gym stuff. And over the course of the pandemic, he'd gotten pretty fit, and this had allowed him a new way to connect to his daughter, who was a college softball player. Anyways, he also said he would like to be able to work out with her when he goes to visit her, and she lives in Myrtle Beach or nearby it. And from being roughly around that area, I know that there's at least 2 or 3 Planet Fitnesses around there. But I asked him, if you've got this gym at home, I mean, we do have slightly heavier weights here. Planet Fitness has a lot of machines, but it really sounds like you've got this taken care of by yourself. And that's when he tells me that he lives in a town that I know is about as far out in the country as you can get. Any given square mile of this place is more likely to have goats than gas stations. And it's at least a 20 or 30 minute drive to get to this particular location from there. So again, I ask him, why would you take all this time to do something that you're already doing pretty well at home in another place? And then he told me that especially over the pandemic, being without a job and being out in the middle of nowhere, trapped in his own home, that he became very lonely. And that's when he opened up to me about the real reason that he'd come to look at a gym membership. He wanted a community. So my best advice to him was to show up before 8 a.m. every morning, because the pre-work workout people are dedicated. And they have the mindset, and they will be there doing cardio every morning. And if he comes at that time, regularly, he will meet plenty of people and make plenty of friends, I'm sure. And, you know, also that this membership could allow him to go to other locations with his daughter to further the connection that they have through fitness. But this isn't a sales approach that anyone teaches you. First of all, it's not very time efficient. I used to get fussed at a lot for taking too long to try to get to know people, but at the same time, I didn't get fussed at that much because I always closed the deal. And this led me to have the highest sales number of anyone in the gym pretty much any time I worked there in terms of selling people on memberships. I realized that the far more reliable way to convince someone to change their life was to understand what they wanted to change and to show them how to change it. But I was never paid enough to really expect me to take this level of care with every person. And most people who were doing the job then didn't feel that way. And it seems that because of the real serious lack of a pay raise, most of them definitely don't feel this way now. And don't blame them for that. It's just not a great industry to work in right now because there just isn't really a lot of profit in it, especially in the discount chains, and that profit is poorly shared among its workers. I only took such an interest in people because that was the way that I found satisfaction in my own exploitation. It was a way for me to partially escape my own alienation, because I felt good when I was talking to someone and convincing them to make a healthy decision and build a healthy habit into their life. It was literally every other part of the job that was incredibly draining. But maybe my second favorite part at working either place was that it came with a free gym membership. And I spent years not wanting to waste that gym membership. And I eventually learned enough about my own body that when I don't let life bog me down too much, and I can take the time to attend my own personal fitness and time to stretch and time to listen to my body, it helps me feel so more engaged with my life and myself and the world around me. And I think that for someone to change the world around them, they must first feel engaged with it and with themselves. Speaking of engagement, though, this is the end of the series, and if you liked it, be sure to like it. If you have not watched the other episodes, go back and do that now. Maybe watch them again. Maybe send them to a friend. Anything like that that could help grow the base, grow the community, and help, because the more people who get involved with this, the more people will be able to give me good ideas, the more I can crowdsource this idea of building something together, and the stronger that will naturally become. And if you have any thoughts on this, or, want to contribute some knowledge outside of yoga and fitness and ways to do things more effectively, and ways to do those things outside of the capitalist system, hit us up in the comments. Let our community know the ways that also they can make themselves fit outside of consumer activities like purchasing a gym membership or buying a Bowflex or a Peloton or whatever BS they're trying to sell you these days to come between you and that feeling that could naturally come to you with as little as a soft rug or a yoga mat.